Gary, you commit a murder on Monday. You commit a murder on Tuesday. I wasn't about to wait till Wednesday rolled around.
Imagine a man who lived like a lightning strike, wild, relentless, and consumed by desire. Gary Mark Gilmore was never one to wait. His craving for instant gratification ruled every moment, driving him to take whatever fed his desires. Cash, cars, booze, always chasing the next high, blind to the cost. His life spiraled into an endless loop of risk and consequence, with every turn ending behind bars. But in 1976, he made a choice that shattered the cycle for good, landing him on a path straight to death row. 2 murders, a gas station employee and a motel manager over the course of 2 nights. Even though both men heeded his demands. 6 months into his sentence, on the morning of January 16, 1977, Gary sat wide awake in his cell, just hours away from the one thing he had come to desire more than anything, his own death. Food was the last thing on Gilmore's mind. Breakfast came. Toast, eggs, the usual, but he barely touched it. He grew inclined to not having an appetite, especially after a 25-day hunger strike he did last month. The reason? A delay in his execution, as well as separation from his girlfriend, Nicole Barrett. The only real connection he actually cared for. Gary used to send her passionate letters from behind prison walls, but now she was no longer in a condition to write back. Stick around, and I'll explain why. Gary Gilmore, who had grown increasingly vocal in his desire to die, was seething with anger. After months of delays, the ACLU was still finding motions to secure yet another stay of execution, hoping to set a national precedent against the death penalty. That very afternoon, the legal battle raged on outside the prison walls, further testing his patience.
In my opinion, you're all acting like a bunch of moral cowards.
He snapped at Judge Robert Bullock, calling him a moral coward for delaying the inevitable. Initially scheduled for November 15, 1976, Gary's execution had been postponed twice. Gary, resolute in accepting his sentence, wanted no part of these efforts. He repeatedly refused to appeal, insisting that he had made his peace with dying. After the November postponement, Gary and his girlfriend, Nicole Baker, made a tragic pact through letters. Nicole smuggled sedatives into the prison, keeping half for herself. They intended to take them together. When they followed through, both survived. Nicole was sent to a psychiatric facility, and all contact between them was cut off. The passionate letters he once sent to her no longer had a recipient. As Gary recovered, his mother, Bessie Gilmore, intervened. Troubled by her son's fragile mental state, she petitioned for a stay of execution, pushing the date from December 6th to January 17th, 1977. Gary publicly rebuked her for interfering. In the weeks that followed, Gary made another desperate attempt to take matters into his own hands. His determination to die remained unshaken. Even a visit from his brother, Michael, who begged him to reconsider, failed to sway him. Gary saw the execution as his only means of regaining control over his fate. Spending decades on death row or becoming a pawn in someone else's legal battle was never an option for him. Locked away in his cell, Gilmore grew increasingly restless and impatient with each passing hour. The delays had pushed him to the breaking point. His fury at the ACLU and the judicial system boiled over. For 9 long months, Gary endured harsh conditions, denied phone calls, cut off from visitors, and subject to poor treatment. The prison system, in many ways, reminded him of his father, a con man and alcoholic who was as cruel as he was unpredictable. As a child, Gary had been trapped in a volatile environment where beatings came without warning or explanation. This chaotic upbringing fueled a lifelong pattern of destruction. Psychologists noted that Gary's troubled youth had set him on a collision course with the law. His lack of remorse, obsessive personality, and inability to empathize left little doubt that his path was shaped by both nature and nurture. With only one night left before his execution, Gary Gilmore requested an all-night gathering of friends and family at the prison mess hall. His spirits were unusually high. He had plenty of drugs, his family by his side, and even a glass of whiskey smuggled in by his Uncle Vern. At one point, his favorite singer, Johnny Cash, called to sing him a song, and Gilmore sang along. But as the night wore on, a ripple of uncertainty broke through the gathering's grim anticipation. At around 11:30 p.m., word arrived that U.S. District Judge Willis W. Ritter had issued a stay of execution. The news stirred tension and confusion as officials scrambled to respond to this sudden, last-minute turn. Despite the possibility of a reprieve, Gilmore remained resolute, recording a final message for Nicole, urging her to escape their pain together. After one last moment with the people closest to him, the gathering ended, and Gilmore returned to his cell to sleep, prepared to face the end he had long awaited, even as the legal battles continued through the night. Although the night had ended with uncertainty, the morning brought no changes to the routine. Gilmore was being prepped for execution, freshly shaven and given a new set of clothes. This was also the moment when he was asked for his last meal. Initially thinking about ordering 6 packs of beer, Gary instead opted for a final breakfast of eggs, hamburger, potatoes, and coffee. His execution was slated for 8 a.m. At 7:30 a.m., the Supreme Court overturned the stay, clearing the way for Gary Gilmore's execution. At 7:53 a.m., he was escorted from his cell in the maximum security block and taken by prison van on the half-mile journey to the execution area. Gilmore was brought to an abandoned cannery behind the prison, repurposed as the death house. There, he was strapped to a chair with a wall of sandbags placed behind him to trap the bullets. Yes, bullets. Gilmore chose execution by firing squad over hanging. He requested to face his death standing, without a hood covering his face, but both requests were denied. The witnesses included his uncle Vern D'Amico, film producer Larry Schiller, and his attorneys Ronald Stranger and Robert Moody. Although Nicole Barrett, his girlfriend, had been invited, she was unable to attend, having been admitted to a mental hospital. Journalists were excluded from the viewing and waited nearby in another area of the prison complex. As the witnesses arrived by car, they found Gilmore already seated and secured with nylon straps. He was given a few moments to speak to each of them. Small pieces of cotton wool were offered to the witnesses to use as earplugs. It was about to begin shortly. Gary Gilmore sat motionless as Warden Sam Smith read the execution order aloud. His gaze shifted toward the screen concealing the shooters, as if hoping Nicole might somehow be there. When the death warrant was finished, he asked if he had any final words. Without hesitation, he uttered the now famous line.
Let's do it.
Years later, those words would inspire one of the most iconic slogans of all time. Nike co-founder Dan Whedon recalled how he came across Gilmore's final statement.
I thought of Gary Gilmore. They asked him if he had any last words, and he said, let's do it. And I remember when I read that, I was like, that's amazing. I mean, how do you, in face of that much uncertainty, do you push through that, And so I didn't like the let's thing. I just changed that, because otherwise I have to give him credit. Now I don't really have to, so.
Father Thomas Mearsman, the Catholic chaplain, administered last rites. When a black hood was drawn over Gary's face, he whispered to Friar Mearsman, "The Lord be with you," to which Mearsman replied, "And with your spirit." Meanwhile, a prison doctor stepped forward and placed a white target directly over Gilmore's heart. At 8:05 a.m., the 5-man firing squad, armed with Winchester Model 94 lever-action rifles loaded with Winchester silver-tip 150-grain 30-30 caliber cartridges, took aim. In a tradition designed to give some psychological reprieve, only 4 rifles held live rounds, while one contained a blank, so none of the shooters would be certain who had fired the fatal shots. The squad pulled their triggers. The bullets struck, causing Gilmore's body to jolt, his head to turn slightly to the left, and his hands to twitch briefly. Within 20 seconds, all movement stopped. The prison doctor checked for a heartbeat and took his pulse. At exactly 8:07 a.m., Gary Gilmore, age 36, was pronounced dead. He became the first person executed in the United States after the Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty, a fate he had chosen by refusing every legal appeal offered to him. Even in death, Gary Gilmore left behind a legacy unlike any other. Honoring his final request, his corneas were transplanted within hours, restoring sight to 2 individuals. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. See you in the next one.